Hello everybody. I forgot to move over to where the lamp's still here. Hello. Hopefully Quindy or someone else will confirm that you can hear me. This time, sometimes lately it seems like when I press the start streaming button, I think I have, and Twitch disagrees. But it looks like it worked today. Quindy says she can hear me. Since this lamp view is probably not that exciting, I'll just switch over to the other view. And you can see I have my new purple palette. And it's kind of dumb because I already had two of these, but when they were doing purple in their latest Kickstarter, I was like, but I love purple. So I got this purple one and I'm going to give away my blue one. So I'll have my Reaper red one and this nice purple one. But my Reaper red one is busy right now. I could not use that today. But then you take the lid off and it's not any color, which is good. I don't really want it to be a color when I'm painting. It doesn't really explain why I'm crazy. Hey, Bob and Julie are here. And they also, I think what do people call it these days? The hydration pad or something, is thicker, which I liked the sound of. I was hoping it would make it a little sturdier. My old one, I think, is kind of starting to decay. I mean, not that the old-timey sponges didn't do that too. And then this is their new paper too, so who knows if that works, because that's not what I've been using lately. Hey, Trash. But I mean, it feels pretty good. It's warmer today, so I guess the heat won't be coming on as much, and hopefully my paint won't dry out, even if this paper is not as to my liking as just plain old parchment paper, because I'm very boring that way. All right. So, we're kind of going to do Halloween again. Quindy said every day is Halloween. She authorizes that point of view, so I decided to go with that. Well, no, what really happened? So last week after I finished, which I didn't finish, and that was disappointing in itself because the previous two Halloweens I'd been able to do monochromatic miniature in one show, and I thought that was a fun tradition, so I was trying to do that, and clearly I did not. But also, after I put this guy up on the shelf, I just wasn't very happy with it. And I've talked about this kind of thing before, and I'll probably keep on talking about it because I think how we think about our painting and our experiences is just as important as remembering to wick your paintbrush and what kind of paint consistencies work for what thing and all those kinds of technique things. Because it's very tempting to just say, I don't like it because I suck. I did something wrong. I just wasn't able to accomplish this task. So not only was I too slow, I was just bad at the actual task. And just leave it at that. And your brain just says, you don't like it because it's terrible. This is not helpful in a variety of ways. So I tried to think more deeply about it. And this is going to sound like a simplistic answer in a way. It's kind of a two-part answer. I hate this color. And I kind of knew going in that I hated this color because I don't like that like classic sepia. So these are watercolor swatches, not acrylic, but this is a classic sepia paint. And I think I did those colors, but I hate it. Like, I don't even think I have this paint anymore because really I hate it. I wouldn't use it. When I originally thought of, in my mind, what I think of as a sepia tone photo is probably closer to the burnt umber. And then the definitions I was reading, because I decided to look this up before the show, is that the classic definition for sepia is like a dark brown with warm undertones, which this really doesn't have. This is a cold brown, and kind of in between these two. And then out of curiosity, I was just watching a couple videos and stuff. Dave Grigger, the Gravedigger. Hi, Pendrick. And Zachariah. So I was watching this little video about sepia, and it started as sepia ink, which is made from the ink of squids, I think. See, now I guess I didn't pay attention to the whole video. Octopi squids. But it turns out that the ones, I think it was the Adriatic, have so the classic ones have like a warmer tone, and the ones in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic make ink more like this color. So there actually just isn't one color of sepia. And then I learned some interesting stuff about sepia photos, but we'll save that for later. So I think a big part of what I didn't like is I didn't like those colors. I felt like the lighter versions got really chalky. And it's just blah. It's just the kind of color I think is super blah, and I don't like it. You know, that's one of those personal things about color. Someone else might be like, but that's perfect for, you know, a creepy guy. You should be blah. And maybe you should, but I don't like it. So last week I used kind of colors like this, and I think this was my light color. So that was, if you did like that color, we'll just, wood stain brown, muddy soil. I'm not even sure I ended up using the muddy soil. I think what I did was just use walnut and mix it in, and then I mixed the wood stone with blonde highlight, I believe. Wood stain. So if you do want more of a classic / Atlantic sepia, those are your colors. But let me just show my picture for a minute, actually, because I think that since these pictures are, you know, well over 100 years old, the copyright shouldn't apply. So I had found these two photos before last week, and I did my sampling thing because I wasn't, you know, I wanted to see what the colors were, and I decided that was the more legitimately sepia photo. But this is the kind of thing I like more. And even this photo, I wasn't sure. I think it's a digitally converted to sepia tone photo, so it's probably modern and still under copyright, so I didn't include the photo. But these are the colors that I took out of it. And this actually is probably really what my brain was thinking of when I thought of sepia tone photo, or like old westerns and stuff. But that almost seems like too much. So what I think I would prefer is a color scheme like this. So I'm going to try that this week. And originally I was just going to repaint this guy, which probably wouldn't, you know, since I'd almost be tinting in some ways, probably be take too long. But then I thought, since we have his companion, these come together in a blister pack, why don't I try the new color scheme on this one, and then we can kind of compare, and maybe later I'll repaint this guy, who knows. But I thought that might be the way to go. So I attempted to pick out some paints that were closer to this idea. I went a little less, I mean, this is like really skin tone. I was kind of surprised. Like, I was like, I don't know what color these are. And I think it was because it was skin tones. So that's one thing to think about when you're trying to match colors, or, I mean, I guess just when you're trying to match colors. Sometimes we categorize things in such a way that we might not consider them. So since I sort of had these kind of colors filed under skin tone, I didn't think about them. You know, I was going through all my browns and stuff, and I didn't think about them when I was trying to match colors to that photograph. And that's actually why I started pulling out the colors, because I was like, honestly, I just had no idea what those colors are. I went a little less pink with mine because I just felt like that didn't suit the guys that much. But I went back over my skin tone rack, and I've got golden skin, and this is called something else now. That's why there's an underline there, and I'm blanking. Swarthy. Anyway, the paint number is 9442. I do not remember its current name, but then I went warmer with the darker colors. But I'm still going to use the, oh, that's black. I'm still going to use the walnut, wherever it went. And then, so I didn't want to go as pink as in the photo, so I went with golden blonde. And then I'm going to use white and black, which I didn't last week, and that was kind of the other part of where I went wrong. So, well, I mean, I went wrong a few places, but first there was that I was limiting myself from considering certain colors because I have paints categorized under things mentally. And, you know, color's just color. Because you might be trying to paint a skin tone, and there are colors in it that you wouldn't think of as skin, and you're struggling to match it because you're not going over to the not skin section of your paint collection and looking for that. Pendrake says, I read that photos of that era turned blondes into raven-haired girls, Queen Victoria being a prime example. Her hair was actually blonde, like many of her German ancestors. Photography was sort of invented in her lifetime. I don't know about that. I do know that for black and white movies, the colors they would choose for costumes and scenery and stuff, if you saw that in full color, it would often look insane because they were choosing things to make the correct value on film. Not, you can't just necessarily take here's black and white, here's a color thing and you take a black and white photo and it looks great. You've got to think like that's the whole point of the monochrome that we were talking about last week. It's all about the value. So they have to choose the costumes, and they probably put a lot of thought into textures and some of that other stuff we talked about last week, and that I might talk about again. But what I did learn about sepia photography that was surprising to me is that I assumed that they looked like that because that was an older photographic process. And then eventually we came up with black and white and used that instead. This is not at all correct, apparently. They came up with black and white, and they started changing them to sepia for two reasons. One was just the look, making warmer photographs. I mean, since a lot of photographs are going to be portraits of people, it really makes sense to go ahead and go with a warmer thing because it's going to look nicer in portraits. But the other reason is that the chemical process that they use to sepiafy the photos makes them last longer. That's why we have so many sepia tone photos from that era, is they lasted longer than the black and white ones. Presumably they still do. I think it's something about the difference in the chemical process. So that's kind of like, okay, had no idea. What's interesting to learn. Because for last week, excuse me, I had not gone and done much research. But when I was talking about sepia ink, that was the one video mentioned this, and then I saw it on Wikipedia too, that Leonardo, all of his sketches in his books and stuff are done with sepia ink, and it's got like a nice reddish undertone. Oh, probably I didn't need to do that. So I'm not insane to have thought that there should be more red. The sepia, more red in the brown. And then now people mock it up with digital changes however they want. So there's even more variation now. Presumably the old pictures that I have as well, I don't know if if there's some variation in the process that the photographers used. But I imagine, kind of the weathering idea and the passage of time and all those things are also going to affect how the colors look now. I would assume. Pendrake. There are all sorts of weird chemical processes in early photography. I took a class in this once and ultimately flunked because of the weirdness with the finals. The finals, I imagine you were supposed to process things and it was too weird. Zachariah, I have a friend I could add. She used to do old school film developing. That would be interesting. I imagine that it's a whole thing. I mean, before we had Photoshop, people did a lot of that kind of thing in the processing stage, I believe. Because I have watched, I think her name's Bridget Banner on YouTube. She's a costume historian, but she did a video on, don't take Victorian photos at face value because they kind of had their own Photoshop. So they would do stuff like if you take the person's picture against a pretty plain background, which, same kind of thing people are doing on Instagram now, you can use a pen or paint and paint in the color of the background where the waistline is and make them look thinner. or like they have more of that wasp waist corset look. So some of it is actually the silhouette of the costume makes it look like the waist is smaller than it is because they've broadened the chest and the hips. So your brain just interprets that as the waist is super small. But some of it was actual non-digital trickery. And then there's that whole story with the girls that saw fairies, and that was just, they put pictures of fairies in the photograph and then took pictures of it, and photography was new and people believed that that happened. And I'm sure they'll be laughing about some nonsense that we believe now 100 years from now. So, but yeah, this idea that we invented manipulating photos is very, very incorrect. Pendrake, no, the photo class and a watercolor class scheduled their 4-hour finals at the same time slot, and I didn't cope. Well, I don't see how you would cope. I mean, that's insane. Trash wants to know about the people who had waists made of real wasps, which is very hard to say, and I think that's why he put that, so I would have to say that. And I don't think Bridget's done a video on that yet. All right, so have I got my light in the right place to illuminate Mr. Assistant? I got to go looking for some big brushes for this guy. I did not think enough about the color scheme, but let's just go. We'll make him, I mean, he's not well. We'll make him kind of pasty. Did I get a big enough big brush? My size, I like, no, this isn't the one. There's a set of brushes that I got from the art store. Grab one. So this one's very big. The Ebony Splendor Creative Mark. And I really like those. They held up well. I used the size 6 for like swatches and some other stuff like that. And I've used it a long time. And recently it kind of, splayed and gave up the ghost. So I couldn't use it for actual painting. It's barely actually still tolerable for swatches. But I should go get a new one, but I did not, so I cast around to see what I already had, and I had these. Actually, I did get this one, that I don't even know where it's from. A friend might have given me this, because when they get brush sets, they don't need the small ones. So sometimes I get their small ones. Because this guy is a lot more realistic than the other guy. He does not skip arm or chest day. So hopefully, I mean, because last time wasn't actually Halloween. It was like the day before Halloween. Hopefully everybody had a fun Halloween. Although I think in a lot of places the kids had already been trick-or-treating. When we were out and about, I was really surprised and impressed with how many places we went in where people who were working there were in costume. It seemed like they were having a good time. So that was fun. Just some weird angles to reach. But this is a 1-part miniature, which I always enjoy. So, for those who weren't here at the beginning, I was talking about how I was not happy with how the miniature I painted last week came out. And that's partly why I'm doing this new color scheme. I actually wasn't too happy about how the show turned out. I feel like I was very kind of distracted and all over the place, and I apologize if that was the case and it wasn't very fun to watch. I was probably just overexcited because of the launch of a new Kickstarter. If anyone wasn't here last week and has somehow managed not to hear, Reaper is running a Kickstarter currently, which is not Bones, although there are miniatures in it. It is for a new role-playing game that they have made. So you can, I'm sure that if it hasn't already, there we go. Reaper Miniatures bot in the chat is giving you the link to pop over to Kickstarter. And if you're watching this later on YouTube, and it's not very much later, because, you know, Kickstarters don't go forever, you can just go over to Kickstarter and look for Dungeon Dwellers, and you should be able to find it, no problem. So what color would other things be? Well, for contrast, which is still important, and with which, if you remember from last week, we have more limited tools to work with if we've removed color variations and we just have the value scale here. So this will kind of like frame him if his skin's pasty and stuff, making this coffin a dark wood is both, you know, thematically appropriate and works to accentuate his skin tone. So if I'd made him a darker skin tone, I could kind of do the opposite by making the coffin a light wood. Oh, look, we can see where I did not put in enough primer, but hopefully this is also a place where people are not going to be rubbing their fingers on, and it'll be fine. I mean, I'm obviously going to have to come back here and work on this again because I've got wet edges touching each other. Things will get smudgy, but that is fine. Oh, I bet his feet are also skin colored. But I could, and I think I will, actually go ahead and start with a darker color on the feet. To, you know, that idea that the light's going to be coming from up here somewhere. Did I decide? Apparently not. And the feet are less interesting to look at. You can just go ahead and start them darker. Or think about it more as starting this area lighter sometimes might be a more helpful way to think about it. Jeremy Bonamont called that the halo effect, which I don't know if that's actually like a term in art, but it wouldn't surprise me if it is. So this is another idea that challenges how we think about things. So I didn't think about looking at skin colors to paint sepia tone, or the sepia tone I like, anyway, the Adriatic sepias. And, you know, we have this like notion that something like skin is the same color all over the whole body, which it emphatically is not. Like if you have a mirror handy, put your hand up next to your face, and your hand is not going to be the same color as your face, or the same value. And then we have areas where there's more blood flow. You know, I'm even going to go ahead and see that part of his chest is not getting light, so I'm just going to go ahead and make it darker right now. Why wait? And I'm going to go ahead and make this hand darker. So I'll leave that one lighter, I think. Because, you know, his carrying the coffin is part of the story. Or, you know, the interesting part of the story for me of this miniature. But this hand is just there. So I'm not going to emphasize it. And when you look at art, that's happening all the time. People are doing things like that, making something darker than it might really be, or lighter than it might really be, for the sake of the composition or the story they want to tell or whatever. So realistic, how did I put some, authentic? You want something that looks plausible. You don't necessarily want to copy real life. And that's the other area where I went wrong that I want to talk about. Because even knowing this, even knowing that you don't want to copy real life, and if you're adapting something from art, you don't necessarily want to take everything they did and put it in yours. So in this case, last week when I was talking about, you look at the photos, there's no black and there's no white. This is true. I think I have to go to black and white on the miniature in at least a few little spots, because it's a different form, it's small, we need that contrast. Pendrake, Anne's pro tip of the day was that pear smoothies are a bad idea. Yeah, I don't think I would disagree. Haven't had it, but I think it doesn't sound promising. So Trash doesn't like pears in general because of the graininess. And I don't love the graininess, but I'll eat a pear now and then. I'd probably rather draw or paint a pear than eat one, but I will eat them occasionally. I often buy decorative pears to draw on my sketchbook. Do I often draw them on my sketchbook? Not necessarily. So I just look for the pretty ones, or, if it has the stem still on or something. They're not necessarily eating pears. If I remember in time, I eat them. I'm not highly invested in that. Apparently I forgot that this coffin has 4 sides. Or actually 6 sides, because it's existing in 3D space. So like where I was saying about I would go for black, under here is an example, really. I really, want to capture that sense of 3D-ness. Wow, he's so big the camera's actually kind of struggling to get the part I'm working on in focus. That's interesting. And then I'll probably just use straight up black otherwise in lining or other, recesses or things like that. But I think it's important to have that little bit extra contrast because of miniatures being miniature. I'm just taking a stab at some values and then being too messy. So I think I lost my train of thought when I was explaining to people who might have come in later why I had analyzed my dislike of what I painted last week, which was, it wasn't here. This guy, we can already start to see the difference in the, like it almost looks way more different than I expected. Maybe this is a little too warmer saturated, but that is not going to be too hard to change if I decide that is the case. That's just going to be glazing to the rescue. I'm going to proceed with what I have and see where we end up. So partly I'm analyzing it to learn, to to figure out stuff, because then, hopefully it'll be easier the next time, or just correcting problems becomes easier the more you start trying to understand the cause of those problems, instead of just, throwing your hands up and saying, I'm terrible at this. And that does count as much for when you're trying to learn a new technique and you do something you saw somebody do in a video or a tutorial or class or something, and yours doesn't come out at all like theirs does. And, it's real easy to just say, well, that's just because I'm terrible at this, and I don't have any talent, and I'm not an artist, and they're like a genius, and I guess this technique just isn't for me. I give up. The end. That's a very easy thing to do, but you will get a lot more out of the experience if you remember that's a first try, for one thing. Like, why are you expecting to do the same as someone who's been doing something a long time the first time you do it? Like, if you were doing something, like if you were doing sports or something, you wouldn't expect to do it the same way someone who's practiced a long time did it the first time. Why do we tend to have this expectation for artier type things? Don't know the answer to that, but we do. So that's just not very helpful. Where instead, if you get your thing and you look at their thing, or the video or the pictures or whatever, and you try to figure out what looks different, and then you go through and you watch the video again and you try to see if you did something differently than they were doing it, which could be, your paint consistency, how you're handling the brush, the size of brush. They're using one kind of brush and you're using another. You're using vastly different colors. If you analyze that with all your left brain skills, that's how you get better at things. And then, as we've talked about before, if you torment yourself too much about being bad at something, like every time you paint, you just feel crappy about what you did. We are wired to avoid pain. If you make yourself feel crappy every time you paint, you're just going to stop painting. You're going to find reasons not to do it, because you don't want to feel bad anymore. So it's ultimately very unhelpful to your hobby and your relaxation and your end goal of painting an army or winning a contest or whatever your end goal may be. It's unhelpful to all of those things to mentally pile on yourself too much. I'm not going to make any claims to you that I'm going to finish this in one session. I've just been slow lately. I don't know why. I've been, I'm always slow, but now I'm extra slow, and it's a little bit frustrating. But if I was going to try to solve that problem by, doing some speed paints would probably be a good idea. Trying to do that while I'm also trying to stream and be interesting and stay focused, staying focused on the camera and do all of the other tasks that come along with this, which is a multitasking level that my brain is not prepared for. I'm setting myself up for failure and disappointment. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just do what I can and focus more on the streaming part and hanging out with you all and stuff part than the part where I said I can paint something in one session because it's monochromatic. And I need more of that ready leather, which is a great color in general. Trashorama. There was an article I read a few years ago. That exact mindset is a modern Western thought pattern. People expect to be the best at the things, and when they are judged not to be, they often give up to spend time on things they are better at. I do think that our culture is really, really bad about it. And for whatever reason, we are the worst about it on creative stuff. If you want to sing, you need to be amazing. You need to be able to be in the church choir or professional or do on the weekends or whatever. You can't just sing because you like it or just try to get better a little bit. And certainly any visual art thing, it's like you're supposed to just be amazing at it out of the gate. And that's not how it works for the people who are amazing at it. Even they are amazing at it because of years and years and years of practice and study and failure that they have learned from. But people instead have gotten this idea that talent is a thing. So if you can't do something straight away, it means you have no talent for it. Or then we do this other awful thing where if you are okay at something, then you're supposed to monetize it. Like, you can't just do it for fun. It's like, oh, you crochet these great hats or whatever. Well, you should start selling hats on Etsy. You can't just make hats because you like to make hats. You got to turn it into a whole thing. And it's hard to drown those voices out. But it's worth the effort, I think, because the more you can do that, the more you can, the more you're like, this is a hobby. A hobby is a thing you do for fun, not to make money or because you're supposed to be professionally amazing at it. It is the thing you do for fun. And I'm not saying it's bad if your dream is to, paint for commissions or sculpt and sell your own miniature. I'm not saying those kinds of goals are bad. I'm saying the idea that everyone is supposed to be aiming for that, if not doing it straight out the gate, is what's bad. It's okay to do something because you like it. You don't have to be amazing at it. While we're making things darker, just go ahead and slap some up on the ground here. Because that was just looking really glaring next to everything else. This almost seems like crazy warm now, and I even was like, oh, I'm not going to choose really pinky things. So maybe I wanted something in between. I don't know, but I like it better. I like the warm colors better. Just not sure it really looks monochrome yet. Or it just looks like this guy and everything in his world is skin color. Which maybe, he's wearing leather. He's made of people. It makes sense. Trash. That's exactly the reason I won't enter anything into MSP anymore. It's far too stressful for me. I want to enjoy my hobby. Yes, and I think that's a completely valid approach. And something good to know about yourself. I think that's the kind of thing that sometimes people just do what they think they're supposed to or what they think they're supposed to want, and they don't stop and think about it. It's like I've had friends who made themselves miserable because they couldn't paint often enough to, really build their skills up. But that's what they kept that their dream. But then their life changed and they couldn't paint very much. So then they're just very unhappy people because they're not painting at the standard they want to, but they can't or won't take the time that's required to do that, and then you're just not happy. So that is literally making yourself miserable, because you can either, if you're the opposite of trash and you're super ambitious and you're like, I want to go win Crystal Demon at Adepticon one year, great, but you're gonna have to practice. You're gonna have to accept frustration and failure in general, not being very happy to get there. Like, that's just how that works. You can't have the cake and eat it too, I guess. But for a lot of us, I think it's the opposite message, that it's okay to just do it the way you like it. Like, you don't have to constantly be striving to be better. You can just enjoy stuff. I feel like I want his pants to be that color too, actually. And then for me, when I did start doing this as not a hobby, I had to do something else as a hobby. Like I had to do something else that was just for me. And that I was okay to fail at or not do if I didn't feel like it, or not feel like I had to go enter contests and be a professional and whatever. So I'm not going to paint the trim on the, this is not like the world's best brush. I'm not going to paint the trim on the coffin yet, or his little shoulder pads, because those are just going to be, you know, NMM. And that is for later. But do I want to finish the coffin first? Maybe I do. Probably be easier to fix that than to fix the skin. And that's kind of like the thing I was talking about with the being slow. So I'm slow right now. I can accept that, or I can say that's a thing I want to change. If I make the decision to be slow and not do anything about it and be really pissed off about it, I have only myself to blame for how I feel in that scenario. So I might like to, you know, spend a little time doing speed paints, try to kind of, you know, reset my gears on that, because certainly it was helpful. Because I didn't actually speed paint much in the early days of painting. I pretty much was like slow and deliberate from the beginning. So speed painting is something I worked on a few years in, because I had to go do a speed paint for charity at Gen Con. I managed to not get roped into it for a lot of years, but finally they realized they'd been overlooking their opportunity to laugh at me attempting to be fast. So I practiced. I did a couple dozen miniatures, I think. Maybe not that many, but I'd do them. I put the timer on. I would paint them in definitely much less than, or much more than the time allotted. And then I'd be like, okay, well, let's try again. They were all bones, I think, so I would write the time it took down on the bottom of the miniature in Sharpie. So somewhere I still have a bunch of like zombies and guys. Sakurai I am. Yep, accept to learn failure is part of the process. Yeah, and it's actually like an integral part of the process. It really is how you learn. It's not like taking a test where you're just writing out answers and you memorize things well. You're doing a physical process. Not doing it well helps you figure out what works for you to do it well. Trashorama. Speaking of other hobbies, the Ticket to Ride Legacy game was released last week. I'm not sure if you and Kevin like Ticket to Ride, but good gravy is that box big. Ticket to Ride Legacy. Interesting. I mean, not the first game I'd have thought of as a legacy game. Like, well down the list. We are hoping, so like a while back, Kevin backed this fancy game table thing. Well, I mean, it's not the fanciest of game tables. It's table topper, so it's like it goes on top of another table, but then they eventually figured out a way to make it where you could attach legs. And it's like one of these ones. It's got the railing, and you can hold cards in a section of the railing and swap out the felt mat and all those things. But he was very excited about this, and we decided to go ahead and do that instead of our previous dining room table. And the part I was excited about is that you can put a lid on top of it for when you do want to use it as a dining room table and eat, so you're not trying to eat and not mess up your wonderful felt topper, because that's impossible right there. That's asking the impossible of myself, to eat and not spill on things. So you put this like these metal, well, it's not like a leaf because it doesn't go in between, it goes on top to turn it into a flat, slightly raised surface. But it also lets you save, in essence. So if you're playing a legacy game or something that was long and you just didn't have enough time, or you're doing puzzles, don't want the cats to run amok on the middle of the puzzle, you can put these pieces back on top and then go back to using your table as a table, and then when you're ready to play again, take the pieces off and the game is there waiting. So I was excited about this feature, but even though we've had this table for quite a while, we have not really used that feature. Like, we've used the table a lot, but we haven't really played an ongoing legacy game or something like that. But we are intending to start back. We played a lot of Thunderstone Quest when it came out. We got through a lot of it, but then we hadn't played for a while and we didn't finish it up, and they've made money more since then. So we want to go back and do Thunderstone Quest, and we have Clank Legacy, I think it is. That one looks fun. Kevin's kind of funny with legacy games because the idea of like writing on cards or the board or putting stickers or ripping things up is just like horrifying for him. So he's accustomed himself to the concept, but he's still like not very comfortable with it. I mean, it's weird. It's like weird after decades of playing games where you're trying to like not alter them in any way, that you're supposed to deliberately alter them. It is a mind shift. So we've got like a bit of a stack of things, so I hope we get to that one soon. But I'm gonna want to watch some reviews or something. That seems interesting. Trashorama. I didn't do the topper, but I own several of the mats that go in them. Hey, no time for bull. Mrs. Trashorama is very anti-distraction. Yeah, it's definitely not going to work for everyone to play the games where you have to mess with things. Some of them are nice because, you know, it's just things you open, and they'll even make a list of, all right, if you put this back in the envelope, it's like you reset it and you can, oops, play it again. I'm trying to, not sure if the lamp is in the right place to illuminate everything. Yeah, those mats are nice. I enjoy having the table more than I expected. I mean, it definitely doesn't solve the cat in the game problems while you're playing, because cats can work around that. And I always forget to use the thing where you can put the little cards in. There's a slot around the edges so you can put your cards in there. And I never remember about that feature. But I think it's been a while since I played one of those games where you have like just such a huge hand size that you can't hold on to it. If you have little tiny hands like I do. I'm trying to decide if there's to do. I don't know if I feel like there should be a wood texture on this. And that makes it seem like kind of a roughly built thing, and then it's got this nice trim, which would contradict that idea. But it's also not small. I don't know if I can like just totally not do anything. We'll do a bit of gradients maybe. On the planes. A bit to do. My hope is that because these colors are not very dissimilar, that will not look too terrible. Just trying to decide which direction to go with the, yeah, we'll do darker here. And I'll have to wait if I want to touch that some more. A little patchy on my skin, so I think I need to get just a little more paint on there first. But perhaps with a bigger brush. Trash. There was a quote by Rob Davio about it. You buy pizza for $20 and have no qualms about throwing away the box. A legacy game should be held in that same regard. It's about the overall experience. That's a very valid point. Because it's not like the resale value of games is reliably amazing. We just put together another set to take over to the local used book / media store, where we will be receiving something far less than the original sticker price. And space. We will be receiving space. I'm very excited about that part. Reclaiming space in our house. is a long cherished dream. What I need is a brush that I haven't used for a while. And thus cannot find it. Oh, there it is. I need my size 1. I've been using that lately. Into my size 0. Although brush sizes are far from standard, so if you are using a different brush, which is one of those things to realize if you're feeling bad that, oh, this person says they can paint eyeballs with a size 4 brush. Their size 4 might not be the same, and also if that's not how you like to do it, then don't do it that way. I think it's good to try using a bigger brush, like, you know, for painting all of this with a teeny weeny little brush would have been not the most efficient use of my time. So it's good to try, especially for people who are just beginning. They often feel like they have to use these super tiny little brushes. But if you try and you find that you enjoy or find it less stressful to do some things with smaller brushes, like just use smaller brushes. It does not matter what the internet is telling you about that. Now here's actually, we could kind of cheat and do some interesting things. Would it technically still be monochromatic? I don't know. But I'm wondering if I took that darker color and mixed it with this redder color, would I get something that's not at all different than that? It would probably depend on which color you're using, whether it would make much of a difference. But in this particular case, it did not really. It was worth trying. It is weird to have such a not colorful tongue. Missed painting that little bit. Alright, now let's work on making him pastier. You guys probably can't hear it, but there is a squirrel very loudly rummaging through our leaves. I was kind of surprised earlier when I looked out, because sometimes I hear the leaves rustling and I'm like, that has to be a more sizable creature than what we usually get around here. And then I looked out and it was just a squirrel, not caring how much noise he made. sure why I did the dark part first. That's not usually how I paint eyes, because I'm messy. I do it like that. I have a one side of the line approach to fiddly things, which is not the best for brush control. I mean, building brush control, but it is less stressful sometimes, where I'm just worried about getting one side of the line right. I don't care I got the whites. Oops, why am I persisting in doing that today? Should I have given him a lighter thing back over Bennett? Because, you know, I'm not sure he's entirely alive. So if I were painting in color, it'd be fun to be bringing like greens and purples and blues into his skin tone to kind of suggest that slightly less than normally alive kind of look. But alas, that is not an option here. The sad thing about painting monochromatic is losing access to tricks like that. But I will keep some of that darkness in the socket to make him look kind of haggard. And this is the thing that's kind of fun about painting. I mean, male characters in general, but especially like really exaggerated ones like orcs and these kinds of characters, is you can really go nuts with the expression lines and wrinkles and all that kind of stuff. And it looks good, where if you try to do that with a feminine character, it frequently does not look great. Much more subtle approach to expressions is usually going to be more what you want if you're painting like a elven lady or princess, or you know, something like that in particular. If anything, I'm too restrained. When I paint these more expressive type of characters, I don't use enough contrast often. I'm going to try to find a nice middle ground here. I hope. Because I don't want his skin tone to get too dark in the end. Because I'm trying to make him look all pasty. That's why I think often when people who are used to using a lot of washes and kind of all those great quick paint shortcuts that we use for painting a lot of figures more quickly, they often get a little frustrated when they start painting characters they want to look more feminine, because those techniques typically do not work great with the more kind of subtle expression lines and wrinkles and stuff that will look better for a character you want to look feminine and pretty. Which I think is something else we tend to, it's like if you learn a technique or a way of doing something, or you paint a certain color and then you do something else and it doesn't work, it's like, well, it's just not all techniques work with all shapes, and not all approaches work with every color, and it is annoying that you have to go do different things, you know, and you just want to paint. It's like, why won't this blue behave the way the purple did last week? And it just doesn't. And understanding and accepting that is going to be better in the long run than believing you're doing something wrong every time, or driving yourself nuts trying to find the perfect paint that everything is consistent and everything works the same, because I don't think that exists. As much as companies keep telling us that exists, I don't think that exists, because pigment just doesn't work that way. Now he's got a couple little choppers up here. They're fun. And here's where, you know, contrast. I'm using like these colors for, I use these for that for the eyes and this for the teeth. Because we call things the whites of the eyes, and, you know, teeth are pearly whites, but they're really not that bright. And if you paint them that way, we have to paint them brighter in miniatures than you would if you were doing like a, you know, canvas painting even. But especially on the teeth, if you go like crazy white, it's just everybody just staring at the mouth, and that's not necessarily what you want. And then we can add like a little bit more as highlights here and there, a little lighter. But that's like an underhang. I'm actually going to go ahead and do that because there's so much natural shadow. But I don't want to like start them out white. I do kind of like this effect here where I think I missed, but it makes this eye look all like droopy and stuff. I'm going to paint that in a bit more. Alright, that one maybe drooped just a smidge too much. Hey, Nelkwaz. Thanks. Welcome to the channel. I'm working on, it's supposed to kind of look like a sepia tone photograph. Which I had worked on at this guy's boss on Halloween. Where is he? So these guys kind of pack together, and they come in both bones and metal. So these are the metal ones because I was feeling old school that day. Because I like prepping metal better. Well, metal or the like the Bones USA or the 3D prints. Those are probably actually my favorite to prep. because I can just use my hobby knife. But then I prefer metal over more flexible plastic for prepping, because I can do it with files instead of trying to pair things with a knife and worry about pairing myself, because I do worry about that. But if I was gonna toss these guys on a table, I would have picked the bones, because then I don't have to worry about other people knowing how to treat miniatures as much. Because that'll give you a heart attack if you start playing miniature games with people who don't know much about miniatures. Like, no. You don't just tap them and knock them over. We're pretty chill about our board games. Like, we don't have one of these you can't eat near the board games deals. But the one thing that'll make me get all twitchy is if someone who is not a board game person is like totally doing the Cheeto finger thing, and they're not. Like, if you're using a napkin and you're wiping your hands and then you're touching the pieces, great, fine, I'm down with that. If you're just like eating the chips and then picking stuff up, it's like, nope, I will tell you about how napkins work. I'm normally very Canadian and don't like confrontation, but that one will make it happen. Quindy has shared the links to the Bones USA. Oh, he's Bones USA now. Well, maybe I should have got that. And the metal version. Tarzan2319 has joined us. It's funny, I'm painting these guys. They've been in their cart for ages waiting for a purchase, and this might be the push to grab some. Yeah, they're just super fun. They've got so much character. Like, this guy's just so, like, brooding and intense, and then his friend is like, rah. And they are two different versions of sepia tone, and I feel like maybe what I want is something in the middle. I don't know. But I am having a lot more fun painting the warm color. It's not getting as frustratingly chalky and whatnot. I don't think I ended up making this guy quite as pasty as I meant to, but maybe tans a little on his day off. I do like the way, the lighter color focused here really makes his face like come out at you. That's why we do the shading and highlighting, because it makes things more 3D, and that's an excellent example. So I don't want to go too nuts on the other parts of him, partly because of where the light would be, but also to kind of keep that effect a little. See, like right there, I think I would have to do lighter color. Or at least in one jump. We gotta bring out his abs a little. He's got some muscles, and that is part of his character for sure. This is another thing that can be tricky if you are painting a female character, even if it has like really strong muscle definition sculpted. I typically will pull back a little on the paint compared to what I would do on something like this, because even a very fit woman isn't going to quite have that same, like, the muscles are there, you just can't see them as much. There is a little more flesh in between. The muscle and the skin. Now we'll go up a little lighter on the pecs. Another area where I regret not having, you know, color hue variation, because yours are often a little more pink than the rest of the skin. So if you put like a little red wash on there, it can look good. Hey, Ultra Squid. Wow, Pendrake once had a job drawing the isometric pictures of the machines that create Cheetos and all the conveyor belts and ovens and such that are involved in making bags of Cheetos. They are giant machines. Hopefully this isn't one of those things where there's a story of like someone fell in there. Cheetos are made of people. Zachariah used to have a friend from computer science class who was a taste tester at Frito-Lay in Dallas. He went there on a temp job, then ended up in charge of a team of taste testers. Wow. So, like, he just comes home and eats salad. He's, like, so done with chips. Because, yeah, I don't know if that would kind of take the fun out of eating chips if you, like, had to eat them as your job. Yeah, I think that's enough of that. How do I feel about this palette paper? Because in general, I don't feel like they're drying out too much. But this one here, I guess maybe I ran it over. Well, it seems like there's still some there, but that one seems like it's a little drier than the others. And it's ending up being an important color. Pendrake. Powdered ingredients go in at one end, water is added, and at the far end, bags come out. Well, that's a very, it is processed food. I guess we need to, it's good to know stuff like that. Because they would love you to believe that that is not at all how it's made. I mean, maybe not Cheetos. I don't think Cheetos wonders around pretending that it's not processed food, but a lot of other things do. Alright, brush, why are you acting weird? Do I even want that shadow darker? I mean, he's out at night. Graveyard. Yeah, I probably do. Alright, but I got distracted. I was working on the armpit a minute ago. I mean, like you do. There's that part where I'm painted wet paint next to wet paint. So we got Goopy. I need to fix it now. I'm trying to figure out if a bit is his shirt or his body, and I think it's his shirt. The nice thing about this kind of character is I don't have to worry if the skin is too smooth and pretty. It really shouldn't be. Tarzan 2319 Pendrake. So it's a time-winding machine essentially makes something out of nothing. Pendrake toured a factory in Dallas while it was shut down. They cleaned the place with high-pressure steam hoses periodically. The whole building smelled like the inside of a dishwasher after it finished a load. Wow, that must be some hoses. That must be pretty intense. Presumably, they have to make sure everyone's out of the building before that happens. Or I guess if it's just the machines, it's probably fine to be an onlooker. I'm sure there are plenty of safety mechanisms. Exaggerate those lines a little. I see that he didn't necessarily get given the standard amount of fingers by his creator. I mean, you gotta cut corners somewhere, right? But yeah, I need more of this color. The regular workers had the week off. Sealand, dang, when I left there was just a little pain on the smile and came back to this. I'm fine. Well, it was good to get the bigger brushes out, I guess. Glad I went searching. Probably should have kept a little bit of that to the side to match, but I'm living dangerously. Just a little smidge more of that. Good enough now. Do I want this arm to have just a little more highlighting? No, I feel like I still see some of the gray actually, so I think I just want it to have a little more paint, if nothing else. Just a little. Don't want it to compete with his face too much. This is still not the interesting arm. Do probably want to accentuate the knuckles a little. I think it kind of might help draw attention to. Oh, there he had that little finger taken off, I guess. But I like how kind of gnarled and stuff his hands are. Don't like that light color there for whatever reason. Disguise that. Maybe just a little smidge more. I just cannot resist accentuating knuckles for some reason. This I feel, oh yeah, that's absolutely getting thicker. Even got a little bit of a skin on it. So I don't know if this palette paper is competing with my preferred Fancy Pants Reynolds. I mean, I do expect paints with white in them to dry out a little quicker. They always seem to do. But I don't usually get stuff skinning over. That seems weird. It's a very regular occurrence that the brush goes flying. Sometimes even like I have to go crawling under the desk to get it back. That's why I have specific clothes that I paint in. Let's see. Reaper, the bot, is telling us about the 26 quarterly community contest, and if you're new here, you should definitely check that out. It's a good way to get yourself to finish some figures. Pendrake, the factory was in East Dallas a long time ago. The parking lot was on one side of a railroad. The building was on the other. There was a dedicated skyway bridge to the entrance. I'm coming back and maybe putting just a little more. On the lid. Before I mess with this hand. Getting those nooks and crannies too. I'm not going to worry about the coffin too much. I think once the trim comes in, it'll look more interesting. Oh, there's a lock even. I don't think that's going to work out for whoever got this casket. I mean, they have a good notion, but I don't think it's slowing these guys down. So what is the feeling in chat about the two different sepia options, the Atlantic and the Adriatic, I think it was. This one's probably a little warm, but I'm enjoying it more than I did painting this, that's for sure. may tone down the warm a little later. We'll see. Zachariah likes both. I didn't bring that shadow up high enough. And it doesn't want to go for some reason. What is going on with this paint? This is what I get for trying new tools before I've tried them out on my own. I don't know why, but painting armpits always kind of cracks me up inside. It just seems absurd. I don't know why. Like, why wouldn't a figure have armpits? But how are they gonna have arms without armpits? Wouldn't make sense. But I still find it funny. Maybe armpits are just inherently funny. Sakurai, if I was to choose, I'd like the warm one with a bit more fading to it. I think I'll have to see if I can do a glaze with one of the colors from the other one. And just take this one down a little bit. I guess I'm forgetting the speed again. So used to characters who wear boots and thinking about that later. I need a brush I can really poke down in there, I think. That's where sometimes where you get that little hook tip on the end of a brush, it actually kind of comes in handy for getting in these weird little places. I guess I have decided to very much take the approach of I'll mess it up and then fix it later. To get some of these shadows in. using a full spectrum palette, it would be fun to paint his nails like, yeah, I guess it could go either way. You could go kind of blue and like, you know, lack of blood flow, or like kind of yellowy talon type of a thing might be fun too. But that is often how I'll paint. I'll just get something, do something messy, and then fix it later. It's really just about how much effort am I going to spend fixing it. Usually the answer is too much. Too much effort is how much effort I will spend. Definitely. On my current project, it feels like too much. I don't know why. It just, not this guy, the thing I'm working on that I can't show yet. It just feels like it's taking forever. And I don't really know what I'm doing differently. That I've gone from slow to like extra slow. But it's kind of frustrating because I want to be done and paint something else now. Then the downside of my, make it messy, fix it up later is sometimes that takes a lot of coats. And there are some colors that it is not at all a great approach for. It is not a great approach for red unless you really do want to take a long time to paint something. Because covering mistakes over with red is not the work of a moment. That was a project that took a while. That I think her name ended up being Zeba the Afridi. And I had to paint her with red skin. And even though I started with an airbrush, which is unusual for me, when I was getting the shadows exactly where I wanted them, I of course made some mistakes. And then it took forever to fix it. Because for that one, I actually took photos with a light source, because it's a fairly big miniature. I mean, bigger, it's like probably that tall compared to this guy. So I was able to set up like a little light and then take photos to see where all the shadows fell, which was cool, but did take a little more than it might have otherwise because of it being like a red. Saturated red color that does not cover. Amazing when you make goose. My paint is definitely drying a little. Even though it's actually pretty nice today. But then we are, it is fairly dry for where I live. I mean, if you live in like Denver or something, it's not dry here. But for where I live, it's dry. And we've even had like you're not supposed to burn right now because it's so much drier than usual. But at least the heat isn't having to come on and dry stuff out even more. Don't want to go too nuts on this hand. Like it's already got a lot of contrast by being next to one of the darkest things on here, which will fade a little bit once I add the metal trim, because that'll have be more eye-catching. But now his poor little feet. Maybe I'm not painting his feet because yesterday I just got up to do something after dinner and I banged my toe into something, and it wasn't like, it didn't seem that bad of a stub toe. Like I didn't swear or go ah or whatever you normally do when you stub your toe when it really hurts. Like it hurt a little and I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I sat back down, we're watching TV, and like 20 minutes later I moved my foot and touched the toe, and it was like, oh my gosh, that like really hurts. So I went and got ice and stuff. But I don't know how I managed to do something that feels painful later that didn't feel that bad at the time. Like that just seems weird. And it's not the worst banged up toe I've ever had. When I was a teenager, I had a couple of runs where one time someone stepped on my foot. And we were out partying. We didn't really like stop and attend to this in any way. I was wearing sandals. And then I think I also made the mistake that I had like a warm bath when I came home, which probably just made all the blood go there. Because the next day it was just this, half my foot was like black and blue, and very exciting to look at. And I had to go work standing up in the grocery store. But I guess that's the difference between being a teenager and a very much not a teenager, is that all that was fine. I did end up having to, like, it got a bit cold after that, and I couldn't wear, I just bought this new set of boots. I was like very excited about them, but I couldn't wear them because they were too pinchy on that toe, which had to be taped to its neighbor. And then like a year or two later, I did the same thing on the other foot, but that time I did, it was from stubbing my toe where it like separates enough that it kind of sprains it or breaks it. And that hurt so much that I actually didn't swear. I just had to sit down on the floor and kind of be in shock for a minute. And it was the same thing. It went all these lovely colors by the next day. And I had to be very careful about what shoes I wore. So I did, at least by the application of ice, avoid the lovely color part. But I think my choice of shoes will be somewhat limited for the next few days. Happily, it's not my driving foot, it's the other one. Because my husband's very excited. He wants to make tacos today. It's his mom's taco recipe. And it's like his favorite thing in the entire world. But we don't have tomatoes, which apparently you cannot have tacos without tomatoes. He's so, like, he's not a person who cooks a lot typically or knows about it. So, like, we'll buy tomatoes and I'm like, okay, they're not a long-lasting food item. Like, they're gonna go funky. Then he'll be like, but we bought tomatoes. Why don't we have tomatoes? It's like, because we haven't gone shopping in 2 weeks. And tomatoes and mushrooms just aren't the things that do that. Not that he's ever asked where mushrooms are, but I wish mushrooms lasted longer. Because I like to put in a bunch of stuff. Mainly the foot thing was just a problem sleeping, because I think I kept kind of half waking up because I have one of those weighted blankets, which I love, but does not feel great if you have an injured part of your body sometimes. Alright, I don't want to get too light on his feet. Haha. Wow, that face really does jump out at you, doesn't it? I probably can go a little lighter on his knuckly hand, but I'll leave that for now. That's a when we're almost done decision, I think. Oops. Well, not that I painted the ground, so it doesn't really matter. If I were being nice to these guys, I would give them a base. But my queue of things I'm needing to give a base to is kind of long because last month my being old problem, well, I don't even know if it's being old. I just get problems with my wrist sometimes. But it was a lot more than, it lasted a lot longer than usual. I think that's the part about being old. It's like I've gone over some threshold of how long it should take to get over these things. And it's frustrating. Because it's not like I was Wolverine to begin with. Maybe I should have sworn. I think I heard that if you swear when something like that happens, you actually have less pain. If you're interested in kind of the history of swearing or the sociological or whatever aspects of swearing, there's a little series on Netflix. And it's hosted by Nicolas Cage, actually. And then they've got some like professor people, but then also some comedians and actors and stuff who come and talk about various things. I could make them match a bit more if Dave got a solid black lantern with a cast iron look. Pendrake has never seen a cat stub its toe. Cats are lucky in that regard. Well, they are very dexterous and whatnot. And all their little toes, you know, they stay closer together than ours, I think. Because they're on their tiptoes. They're actually what we think of as their ankle, or their knee is really their ankle. Because they're like permanently on tippy toes. For better sneaking, I guess. So if his friend is Dave, what's this guy's name? I mean, Igor almost seems like a little too obvious, right? He'll be hurt if we don't give him a more inventive name than that. It's like he's already got to do all the heavy lifting, literally. That is a heck of an ankle bone. explore some of those nooks and crannies. You'd be right there. So my husband says I should actually stream me playing video games because I kind of narrate the whole adventure. I ask questions, or I'm like, just make weird comments. Whether someone is there listening or not, I do this. I think he vastly overestimates how interesting that would be to watch. Although I suppose it maybe is amusing to watch someone be bad at video games as to watch them be good at them. I liked the amount of shadow that was on the other foot. So I wanted to capture some of that. Which color am I on? The classic conundrum with monochromatic is remembering which color you're doing what with. Which mix, I guess, it's all the same color. Which value? Nope, the other foot goes lighter. I haven't been checking my focus enough. I think it's having trouble figuring out which part of the big guy to show you. Next week I will keep the sponge but try my usual paper and see how that goes. I don't entirely understand why I never seem to have much success with the official paper or anything, but so it is. Don't think I ever did the back of the hand. This guy's a lot of real estate, I'll say that. When you're used to painting little regular sized people, I mean, as I am. Well, I think I finally got all the skin I know. Silverthorn from the forums does the game streaming thing once a week or so, apparently. Well, that's fun. What kind of games do they play? I actually haven't been playing enough Baldur's Gate lately. I like it, but I mean the scary part. And sometimes it's just, you know, I'm just trying to... I don't have any brain left, I guess is what I'm saying. So I've been going on Diablo and just punching vampires and and all their little friends. Plus, that's always fun. So if I just want to have a brain dead day, I do that. I used to like this game. I think it was called Marvel Heroes. But it closed down all of a sudden, and it was very sad for me. Because I'm like, where am I going to go mindlessly punch things? And I do still kind of miss it, because it was... You could be like Squirrel Girl and have like a zillion squirrels. Squirrel army. That always amused me. And Luke Cage would be like, "Sweet Christmas," and punch the pavement and stuff, and that also always amused me. And then you could just fight like hordes of guys. And I had been looking for a replacement for that for a long time. So I'm happy that Diablo has patched things in such a way that it now feels more like that game did. I don't want to get too light on this shirt, or it will kind of undercut, you know, the paleness of the skin. But I also don't want it to be too dark. It's got this weird struggle. And I'm not worrying about the part where I have patchy coverage, because hopefully I'll just get to that with the highlights and it'll be enough of a coat. Again, if this were a gaming miniature, I would definitely give things a full coat, or like two coats at least, to have a nice sturdy paint film. I don't think I've shown you all my paint film for a while. Oh, my paint film, because I keep it here so that I can show you. So that's, I poured out a whole bottle of Dragon Blue in the bottom of a bowl. And that's like a large scale version of what a nice paint film is. You know, it's got some flexibility. It's holding the pigment in suspension. It's good and sturdy. That's what you want. This one I thinned down, and then it never came off the plastic. Because the kind of plastic they make sandwich bags out of, acrylic paint doesn't stick to. Oh, 4 million years later, it actually will. So even thinned down, it's still, you know, a solid film. But, I mean, this is not how it would dry on a miniature, because things separated out, obviously, because it took like a week and then some to dry that out. But then this part was a bottle of brush-on sealer. So sealer is more brittle, but also harder. So that you can't scratch it as easily. Hi Blades81, and Pendrake does not know which game Silverthorn was playing. It wasn't Baldur's Gate or Diablo, but her character had a bow. Having a bow is good. I like being a bow. Using kind of character. I mean, in Baldur's Gate 3, what I really like is if they like don't even ever really see me. You know, I just try to get them with my bow guy, or at least get them significantly injured with my bow guy before they even know I'm there. So things where I get surprised work out really well for me, as you can imagine. That's when I tend to have more of a struggle, which is fair. I mean, you know, no party should be good at everything. And I made my choices to not put anyone in heavy armor, because that impacts the sneaking around. probably should actually kind of give him some textury deal. I found this old, nope, not that one. This old brush that I had used for many, many years for like base coating and other things like that. And I was hoping that the bristles, like, it just seems like all my brushes have overly soft of bristles to do the leathery thing that I want to do. So I should have done this before I did the shining, but I forgot that textures would be good because you don't have hues or contrasting colors. It's just all brown with some additional brown. So we gotta mix it up. And textures are a good way to do that. Although he probably was big enough to use my stencil brush on. But dang it, I found this one. I want to test it out. All the texture brushes that you can get, like at the art store, are just too big for what we do. It's frustrating. Somebody needs to make tiny, tiny texture brushes. Reddish brown, cooked and uncooked umber. Yeah, doesn't anyone know how to cook umber? And that most of those classic names. So sepia is, its own thing because it was an ink and it wasn't even a paint until apparently the 1800s. Some guy came up with a way to turn it into a paint. But it's not a great paint. It's not very light fast, which is true of a lot of inks, not just ink from the sea. So now they just make something that's that color, but it's probably iron oxides. For paint, for all I know, they may still be making ink the old-fashioned way. Although I'd be kind of surprised if that were the case. Or at least if it was available in mass quantities, I would be surprised. I think I like burnt sienna the best of those classic colors. Then if you mix burnt sienna with blue, you get these really neat grays. Well, not phthalo blue, but like ultramarine or cobalt or something. Ultramarine in particular. And you just get these really interesting grays and browns and stuff. I mean, not that I ever do this on miniatures, clearly, but like watercolors and stuff. Someday I will drag out the numerous artist pigment acrylic paints that I own and goof around with that, but for some reason I typically don't like mixing with acrylic paints. Like, if somebody already mixed it and put it in a bottle, yay, time saving. Queenie's giving me a time check, so I'll probably just finish the shirt here so that I can go to the store and get some tomatoes and have a delicious husband cooked dinner. Well, normally we make Hello Fresh, so we'll both participate in that adventure. I like how it splits up the tasks associated with that. Like, I pick the food, and one day then they grocery shop for me, I guess, and then I just have to pick which day I want to eat the things that we picked out. And it saves my tiny brain for other things. Well, it's always great to find the little white spot when you're done both those sections. That is super ideal. So that's not like a super exciting vest, but I think that is probably where I would leave that until I saw at the end, because that's not really the story of this guy. I mean, he needs just a little more highlight here. Like, it would be shadowed, but I feel like it's almost a little too shadow right in that section. And then we can accentuate the edge a little, because that almost always looks good on miniatures. There's like a little white dot in there too that I will have to argue with when I can put higher magnification on, I think. So I'm gonna leave him here. Pretty happy with how creepy his face turned out. And then here's his boss with, you know, classic sepia and slightly warmer sepia. Gel tip, are these all individual paints, or are they 3-4 paints and mixes? Let's review the colors. So that's the Barbarian Flesh, is now called something else that I do not recall. 9442 is that one. And then in between, so that's the Ready Leather, and then those are mixes. And that's the Walnut Brown, and there's a little bit of black mixed in. So I mixed in between the Ready Leather and the Walnut Brown. I tried to find colors where I didn't have to mix, but I wasn't confident about the in-between ones. And then to get the lighter ones, I mixed it's not called Barbarian Flesh anymore, with Golden Blonde and a bit of white. And I've ended up not going up to white, although I was willing to, even though it doesn't happen in the pictures, because sometimes we need just a little more contrast. And I think that would have helped this guy a little bit, maybe. I don't know. I still hate that color. Hate it. But that's like one of those personal things where sometimes you just have feelings about a color. But, so yeah, those are the colors that I used. And I used solid black, actually. It's the black that I've had on my desk lately. I like both solid and dragon black better than pure black, but that is pure white. And I will leave that for now. I might continue with, I don't even know if maybe I should continue with both of them so we can do the comparison and then maybe try to make them match. I don't know. But I'm going to leave this for now. And we'll let Quindy find a raid. I'm sure she'll find someone else who's doing some fun hobby thing to enjoy. And I don't know if I have a plan for next week yet. But I will ponder that. I have my closest to Thanksgiving one. We're going to go back to the pie guy. But I'll have to ponder what to do next week. So if there's something you'd like to see, feel free to send me a private message here. And I'll stop yammering. Well, I'll wait until I see that Quindy's selected a raid, and then I'll stop yammering. And see you next week. Okay, you're going to go to Quanah Minis, and you gotta say hi and spread the Reaper love. And I'll see you next week, everybody.